So we'll go ahead and start. Let's have a nice seat, just kind of getting centered. Taking a moment to check in with our bodies. So once you find your straight aligned spine, you can just take a deep breath in through your nose. Just sigh it out. Just gonna let go of everything that came before this moment so that we can be right here, right now, and fully experience every sensation in our bodies. So we want to feel anything that needs our attention, and we want to feel the spots that feel really good and don't need anything from us right now. So acknowledge all of it. And then let's start breathing a little deeper and a little slower. Ujjayi breathing is always preferable. And then just notice any particular thought patterns. Notice any emotions you might be feeling. Notice what your energy is like. Notice if you feel connected in any way. And then let's go ahead and take that information and use it to set our intention. So we each have our own things that we need. And then collectively, we all have certain things that we need. So set your personal intention, and then perhaps if it feels appropriate, send a little bit of love out into the world for whoever else needs the same things that you do. Once you're clear about all of that, take a deep breath in. Exhale with a sigh. Just relax your arms, roll your shoulders back a couple of times. So we're going to be playing with the basics today. We're going to revisit basics. This is always a good thing. For those of you who do vinyasas, you'll have an opportunity to perhaps refine or fine tune. For those of you that have never been really sure about it, you'll get some options. And then for those of you who should really stick with our normal gentle flow of child's pose and sphinx, we'll even be going over that as well. So it's sometimes a good thing to just go back to the most basic fundamental things that we do and fine tune them and remind ourselves that that's really the most important part. Your foundation is more important than anything. So bearing that in mind, let's come up to standing and find our standing foundation, which is mountain pose, Tadasana. And I'm just going to kind of turn and face you guys. So your feet, just depending upon whatever is more comfortable to you, these are both correct. Your feet can either be sit bone distance apart. And a nice way to find that is to let the heel of one foot touch the arch of the other, and then simply spin that heel around. That distance will give you sit bone distance between your feet. Now, if you prefer, my lineage taught us that we should have our feet completely together. If that feels more comfortable to you, do that. So you can experiment, feet apart or feet together, whatever you like is good for you. And so from here, then we kind of shift the weight back towards the heels. We lift the heart just a little, not enough to poke the rib cage out, just enough to kind of lift the sternum. We engage the core. We let the shoulders move back over the heels. Head moves back on top of the spine. A slight amount of energy through the fingers. You don't want to hyperextend or be tense. You just want energy. Slightly rotate your palms forward. For the same reason that you have your palms facing up in Shavasana, this is actually the neutral position for your hands. Most of us rotate in because the front of our shoulders are too tight because we do too many modern things. So just take a moment here and now let's root down. This is our foundation. Tadasana, mountain pose, is the foundation of pretty much any pose. The way your muscles feel engaged but not tense is how they should feel in every pose. We want energy running. Take one more breath here. And then on our next inhale, we're just going to take the arms up and overhead. So this is Urdhva Hastasana, which just means upward facing hands. And from here, you can either stay perfectly vertical and just reach fingers for the sky, Or for those of you that like to, you can do a slight upper back bend, which means you don't lean back from the low back. You just kind of allow the rib cage to roll back slightly. Let's hold this for one more breath. And then on your next exhale, we're just going to bend the knees, fold forward, relax the neck, and hang. So ragdoll, of course, is exactly like it sounds, and we use this to just start lengthening the spine. We're still really connected down to the earth through our feet, but we're just letting the head, which is hanging off of a very relaxed neck, we're just allowing that to lengthen the spine. Let's take one more breath here. And then we're going to plant the fingertips beside our toes. No matter how much you need to bend your knees, lift the chest and lengthen. So this is technically called a half forward bend. So we say we come up halfway. And the idea is to have the back really flat, your chest and your face should be forward, and you actually want your hands on the ground. I know a lot of newer yoga teachers are teaching you to slide up the shins, but you'll never get any progress if you always go to where things are easier. So the idea is we bend the knees enough that we can get that flat back, and then we try and maintain that flat back and just go to the place where we start to feel it in the hamstrings, and that's enough. And then we fold all the way forward. Let's go ahead and step back with the left foot. Just coming into our lunge. And I know you've heard me say it a million times before, but I'll repeat it today just because we're going back to the fundamentals. In this case, since our right foot is forward, we want the shin vertical. So if your foot's way back underneath you and your knee is shooting forward, you're putting an immense amount of stress on that knee. And sometimes the foot doesn't come forward of its own accord. So we can use our hands and bring it forward or scooch the left leg back. When you get your right shin vertical and your hands are on either side of that right foot, even if they're on blocks, then your hands and feet are always going to be in the right position. So we're going to kind of talk about that. There are 4 magic points on your mat. I like to think of them as home, that will always guide you to be in the right place. For now, let's drop that left knee. You've been in your lunge long enough. Bring your arms up and overhead. We tilt the pelvis back here and lift the rib cage up. We don't want to compress in the low back or on the front of the torso. And then we just let the hips move forward. This is all geared to feeling a stretch on the front of the left hip. We're just going to take a couple more breaths here. And then we're going to bring hands down on either side of the right foot and just begin to extend the right leg. And so as much as possible, we straighten the right leg, we flex the ankle and toes. And then within reason, because everyone's body is different, we kind of try and lift the chest and pull it forward while the tailbone's pulling back. So the more we lengthen and extend the spine, rather than hunching and rounding over the leg, the more benefit we get. So to go through our first very basic slow flow, for those of you that need to, you will continue to do this through the whole class. We're going to take the right knee back to meet the left knee. True traditional child's pose, Balasana, has knees together. Backside moves towards the heels. Forgive me, I'm still not going all the way down because of my knee. The forehead finds the mat and the hands are palms up by your feet. It's a really rounded back posture. You can think about a little tiny baby. That's where this came from, right? Now, just go ahead and come back up onto your hands and knees for me. The more modern version, which is actually extended child's pose, is not a bad thing. It's just very different. So let's go ahead and do that too, and then you can decide which one's better for your body at any given time. We're going to keep the feet together, but separate the knees towards the edges of the mat. And then sink your buns back towards your heels, but let your arms extend in front. Forehead still finds the mat. You'll notice that this is a flat back, not a rounded back, and that with your arms extended, you can almost get a little bit of a stretch through the chest and the armpits. Go ahead and come back up onto all fours. Take a moment, just wag your tail. Think of it as yogically cleansing your palate. Okay, so those are your two child's pose versions. Let's go ahead and just walk our hands forward until we can get flat onto our stomachs to come into Sphinx pose. We do this every class, so I know you are masters at it, but you do have a couple of options here. So just to kind of remind you, the true classic Sphinx pose, your elbows are under your shoulders. They are exactly shoulder width apart. Your forearms are parallel, your fingers are spread, your palms are flat. Your big toes touch, your heels drop open, you lift your chest and you slightly pull. And this is great, and that's perfect. However, if your back doesn't like arching this much, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do Sphinx. There is another version that can give you some really good traction as well. Take your arms quite a bit farther forward. So you can only barely lift your chest, and then really pull. You could even take them a little wider if you needed to, if your shoulders are tweaking, and just give yourself a good tug. You can feel that you still get good traction in here, as well as some spinal extension. It's just not as much. And then we're going to move into downward facing dog. Bring your hands just kind of below your armpits. Spread your fingers wide and plant your hands. Turn your toes under. We'll go the easy way first. Just press onto your hands and knees, and then take your buns up and back. So earlier I talked about your magic 4 points. These are them. So I've had you do it before in class, but let's just double check. If you shifted your weight forward, would you be in a proper plank? That means shoulders over wrists, arms are vertical, body is in a straight line. Press your hips back, downward facing dog. There's an inclination for people to walk their feet forward because they feel like they want their heels flat. But if you do that, you don't get as much of the spine lengthening benefits, and you also don't have the opportunity to make progress. So if we keep our hands here and our right foot here and step the left foot forward, even if it doesn't go all the way up, we can help it up. Remember, I showed you that cool little scooch you could do? Your hands will be on either side of your left foot. That puts you in the right position for your lunge. So we don't have to move the hands or the right foot. You were in a plank, you were in a down dog. Now your left foot is just forward, and it works out perfectly, right? Left shin is vertical, hands are on either side of the foot. Everything is working well. Let's go ahead and drop the right knee down. Raise the arms up and overhead. Tilt the pelvis back. Lift the rib cage. Let the hips sink forward. And so again, the whole purpose of this is to get that right hip flexor, the front part of the hip, to open. And then we just bring the hands down on either side of the left foot. We extend that left leg as much as possible. And remember, it's okay if it doesn't go all the way straight. You flex the ankle and toes. You try and lengthen your spine. And you'll notice if you really pay attention in these most basic of poses, you can really get a lot out of them. It's really kind of all that's necessary. So from here, if we keep our hands where they were and are, you can bend your left knee. Your left foot is still between your hands. You can step your right foot forward to meet your left, and voila, hands are on either side of the feet for a standing forward bend, which, as you know, requires that the torso should touch the thighs and that you hinge at the hips, even if your knees are bent. And then you can inhale, reach the arms up and overhead. And exhale, bring the palms together in front of your heart. We're gonna inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, fold forward to your standing forward bend. Remember, hands on either side of the feet. Those are the first two magic spots. This time we're gonna step our right foot back, and it should be in the spot where your right foot was when you were in plank or downward facing dog. You can slide it back if you need to. And what this does is gets us into our lunge. The left shin is vertical and the right leg is extended behind us. Now, for those of you who might like to work into a gentle vinyasa, here is one option. And if you normally do the traditional ones, try this one. We're going to take our time with it. You would step your left leg back to meet your right leg. That's a plank position. You can immediately drop your knees, but keep your toes turned under. You shift your torso forward a little bit. Keep your bum in the air and take your chest and chin to the floor. The elbows hug the sides and pull down. So we keep our shoulders really stable here. You untuck your toes and you just lift your chest halfway for baby cobra. You can go higher if you want a full cobra. And then all you have to do is turn your toes under and push your bum back, downward facing dog. Good time to double check if everything went well. Shift forward. You should be in a perfect plank position. And then just take your bum back, downward facing dog. So left foot's going to stay in that magic left spot, and just the right foot is going to step forward up between the hands. Remember, help it up there if you need to. It's okay. But if the hands are still where they were in plank and down dog, and your right foot is between them, and your left foot is still back there where it was for plank and down dog, you're in the right spot. So think of these little 4 places, your 2 hand spots and your 2 feet spots, as home. That's what I do. This is where these body parts live most of the time. From here, let's just step the left foot forward to meet the right foot, and you're lined up with hands in alignment with toes for your standing forward bend. We're going to inhale and reach the arms up. And as we exhale, come to prayer position. Inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, fold forward. Remember, when you do your forward bend, fingertips are in line with toe tips. It's absolutely okay, by the way, to have blocks beside your feet and have your hands on blocks. Look up halfway, hands stay on the ground. You can come up on the fingertips if you need to, and then fold all the way forward again. We're going to step back with our left foot and put it where it belongs, right? In that magic spot. Home for your left foot. So you're in your lunge again. Right shin is vertical. Here's what we do. We spin the left heel flat and we come up, and that puts us in the perfect spot for our warrior 2. Let's go ahead and take the left hand to the left thigh, reverse your warrior. Right arm reaches up and over. Come on back up, straighten your right leg, shift your rib cage out and find a triangle pose. Bring your left hand down, bend your right knee if you need to, hands on either side of the right foot and swivel onto your left toes. Please remember to go back to your child's pose flow if you need to. Otherwise, I'm going to keep schooling you on the different ways to do vinyasa. So from here, we would step the right foot back to meet the left foot, and that would put us in plank position. Immediately drop your knees. This is your next option. From here, you'll notice my bum is kind of sticking back, like I'm in all fours. I'm going to straighten my body out, let my hips shift forward, so I'm in a straight line. My elbows are going to hug my upper torso as I start to lower down, but I'm going to stop right before I hit the floor, untuck my toes, and lift my chest for cobra. And then turn my toes under and press into downward facing dog. Now that was a modified chaturanga. If you have a hard time doing a full chaturanga, that's the best way to gain the strength for it. So in our down dog, let's just double check, shift forward. You should still be in plank. Shift back to downward facing dog. We keep the right foot where it is. Our hands are still at home base. We step the left foot forward up between the hands, helping it there if necessary. So you're in your lunge, left shin is vertical. All you gotta do is spin that right foot flat and rise up, and you're in the perfect spot for warrior two. Right hand, right thigh, reach the left arm up and over, reverse your warrior. And then come back up, straighten the left leg, lengthen out, and find triangle pose. From here, we just bring the right hand down, bend your knee if you need to. Left hand is on the outside of the left foot, so we're now back to having hands on either side of the left foot. Swivel onto your right toes. Step back to plank if you want to try a full vinyasa. Here's the deal on this. You're better off to do it modified than to cheat. So if you have the strength, you stay with your body in a straight line. You push with your toes and you go slightly forward. Your elbows hug your sides as you lower down and you hold for a split second. Flip to the top of the feet, lift the chest. This is upward facing dog. The only difference between a high cobra and an upward facing dog is that your knees and thighs are off the floor. And then downward facing dog. Press those hips up and back, stretch. Let's just double check everything went well. Plank position, downward facing dog. And so it's never a bad idea to just check your down dog. So maybe the best flow for you is that child's pose to Sphinx. And by the way, that's a dynamite flow. But when you do get to down dog, be really careful not to step your feet too far forward. However, now we're going to walk our feet forward. I want you to go all the way up to your standing forward bend. So your feet are between your hands. You're hinging at your hips. And then we're going to inhale, reach the arms all the way up and overhead. And as you exhale, come to prayer. Let's give the upper body a break and do a little basic balance. Today, we're just going to do very basic tree pose. I'm going to have you start standing on your right foot. Just a reminder, the whole idea here is not to hang out on your hip, but to be very aligned. Come back to that feeling of being grounded in Tadasana, mountain pose. Even if you're modifying and keeping your left foot on the ground, your left knee is going to bend and press back. So your left outer hip is very engaged. It should feel like when you're in warrior two. You can keep your left toes on the ground for a little bit of extra help in your balance. You can bring your left foot to the right calf, or if you feel like you can bring it all the way up onto the thigh. Be conscious of keeping your right outer hip engaged to keep you straight, left outer hip engaged to keep that left knee pointing back. Palms come together. We try and keep our heart lifted. We really should feel exactly like we did in mountain pose, except we just got one foot over here. Otherwise, no difference. Tall, straight, aligned, stable. And then release out. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Remember, your mobility may be different. So toes can be on the ground, right knee bends, but it would need to press, like to open the legs. You can bring that right foot to the calf, or you can bring it up onto the thigh, whatever feels better. And then palms come together. Make sure your body feels straight and aligned. Remember how in Tadasana you felt energy running through your body, but not tension. That's what we're shooting for here. And then release. Good job. Let your arms come down. Just roll your shoulders back a couple of times. All right. Feet together. Palms together. Or you can have your feet sit bone distance apart. When I say feet together, feel free to have that little bit of space between them if you prefer. Let's bring our palms together in front of our heart. This is Anjali Mudra, prayer position. We inhale, reach the arms up. And then exhale, fold forward. Fingertips on either side of the feet, standing forward bend. We try and keep at least the fingertips grounded as we look up and lengthen. And then back down. For those of you doing a child's pose flow, that's what we're going to do. For those of you that like to do vinyasas, the final component is to link the whole thing to the breath. Whether you drop down knees, chest, and chin, whether you do a half chaturanga or a full, you link vinyasa to the breath. So if you're going to do a full vinyasa, you can just follow me. And if you're doing child's pose, kind of take your time there and scoot into space. We would step back to a plank on an inhale, lower down as we exhale, rise up, lifting the chest on an inhale, and flip the feet to down dog on an exhale. So for those of you that like to do the traditional vinyasas, a full vinyasa is just 2 breaths. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. That is it. Everybody, just one last time. Check your down dog. Shift into plank. And move back into downward facing dog. You've earned a break. Drop to your knees. We're going to do a couple of cat-cow stretches. There are different ways to breathe with this, but the most traditional is that when you raise your head and your tailbone, when you arch your back, this is your inhale because everything is expanding on the front side of your body, which is what naturally happens in an inhale. And when you round your back, in other words, kind of tucking your tailbone and dropping your head, pushing your navel towards the ceiling, that's your exhale because the navel naturally pulls in at the end of an exhale. So then you follow your breath. When you're inhaling, the back is arching, and when you're exhaling, the back is rounding. So there are reasons that we move the way we do. And then just pause. So let's do a little bit of low back stabilization. I want you to extend your right leg behind you. Raise it straight up into the air. Flex your foot if you can. You should feel your right glute, your right buttock engaged. And then if it feels okay, your left arm reaches straight out in front of you. You would want to gaze forward if possible, if it doesn't bother your neck. If it does bother your neck, then simply look down towards your mat. Let's bring the left hand and the right knee back down. You're right back onto all fours. Extend your left leg out behind you. Raise it into the air. Flex the foot. You should feel your left glute very engaged. And then if you can, your right arm extends in front of you. Bring your right hand back down, left knee back down. So just kind of double check. Your all fours position. Your shoulders should be over your wrists and your hips should be over your knees. So here's the cool thing. Where your feet are right now, that's your magic home spot. Same 4 spots. Turn your toes under. Test out my theory or test out your all fours position. Press your hips up and back, downward facing dog. And then just to see if it worked for you, shift forward into plank. You should be in a perfect plank. Shazam, back to downward facing dog. And from your downward facing dog, drop down to your knees again. So hopefully you can kind of see these 4 points on the mat. They're like your guide points. They're your little signposts that let you know where your alignment is. Each of us has different height or proportions, but these 4 points always work. All right, before we get into our seated stretches, let's do a little traditional threading the needle. So on an inhale, take your right arm up And as you exhale, scoop it underneath you. You can either use your left hand to gently press and roll into that right shoulder blade, or you can take your right hand towards the ceiling. Go ahead and come all the way back out. Give yourself a tail wag if you need one. And then we're going to inhale and take the left arm up. And as we exhale, scoop that left arm underneath us. Either just gently pressing with right hand to roll into the left shoulder blade, or if you want, you can take your right arm up towards the ceiling. Come on out of that. Hands and knees. All right, so if you are a child's pose flow person, you are going to take your last one, and you can take an extra breath or two doing each of those components of your flow. If you're playing with any of the vinyasas, this is your opportunity to do it with your breath, whichever version you've chosen. So we're all going to meet up in downward facing dog at those 4 magic points. Spread your fingers, broaden your shoulders, reach your hips back, press your heels down, but don't worry about them ever hitting the ground. It doesn't matter. We push them down so that we get some nice stretching through the hamstrings and calves. And then you may walk your feet forward and have a seat with your legs extended. So, I always have you come into Dandasana to kind of check in. Well, not always, but almost always, right? I like to think of Dandasana as kind of the seated version of Tadasana. So Dandasana means staff pose, very much like mountain pose. It helps us ground and connect again. It's foundational pose. So if we bring our hands right by our backside, we can kind of put a little bit of pressure into the palms to lift the chest. We still keep the core engaged. We keep the head balanced on top of the spine. We should feel our sit bones. And then we make sure that our legs are active. So we're pressing the backs of the knees down and the heels. You want your heels pressing into the floor. Feet are flexed. Everything's very active here. If somebody saw you from the side, you'd be a perfect 90-degree angle in L shape. And it looks like you're doing nothing, but if you're doing it right, you can feel there's a lot going on here, right? So what we're going to do from here is slightly bend the knees. In a standing forward bend, you've heard me so many times talk about hinging from the hips, blah, blah, blah. The same thing is true in a seated forward bend. Paschimottanasana, we want to do the same thing. So I want you to bend your knees enough that you can rest your belly or your rib cage on your thighs. And I don't want you to worry about your hands. It doesn't matter. You're going to let them relax onto the ground so that your shoulders aren't squeezed up by your ears. Keep your chest lifted. Keep your gaze forward. Keep your torso touching your thighs and start to slide the feet out. If your legs don't go all the way straight, that's okay. If you're doing it correctly, you're already feeling a hamstring stretch. Now, some of you guys will get your legs straight. That's cool. But if you don't, just notice how attention to a really basic small thing can create quite an exciting stretch in the hamstrings. Let's go ahead and come on up from that. I want you to keep your right leg straight. Bring your left foot to the inside of the right thigh. Make sure you feel both of your sit bones. That's those little bottom points on your pelvis. Technically, they're called ischial tuberosities. When you lean out over your right leg, be mindful of how you lean out. Don't lean kind of between your legs and put your hands over to the right. Get your spine aligned over your right leg and then lean out however you like. If you want to grab your foot or your ankle, go for it. If you want to round a little bit, also okay. But just make sure that your alignment is over that straight right leg. And then we're going to come on up from that. We're going to pick the left foot up and bring it across the right thigh with the left foot flat. So we're keeping our right leg straight. I recommend you keep the right foot slightly flexed, but be very mindful of your left foot. The big toe side of your left foot should stay connected to the ground. Remember, yoga is an energetic practice. We want to stay rooted. So a lot of people cross their leg over and just let that leg get floppy. You're missing half of the benefit if you do that. So make sure the whole sole of your left foot is rooted into the ground. Lift up through your chest and just reach that left arm around behind you and come into a twist to the left. Your right hand can just hug on that left knee, or you can bring your right arm outside the left knee. Yet again, if you just let that arm flop and be lazy, over time, you'll start to hyperextend at your elbow. So do that cool little yoga wave, bend your elbow, and have some energy running through your fingers. Take a couple more breaths here. You're trying to have a really straight spine. You don't want your shoulders up by your ears. You do want to feel compression in the abdomen. And then go ahead and rotate back around. Extend your left leg. Feel free to give both legs a good wiggle. And then we'll do the other side. So keep your left leg straight. You're going to bring your right foot to the inside of the left thigh. And just lean out over your left leg. Remember, don't lean to the right and let your arms go to the left. Try and get your spine aligned over your left leg. Doesn't matter where your hands are. It's not like you get extra points for grabbing your foot. So make sure your shoulders stay relaxed and that you're really just feeling a super nice stretch in your left hamstring and maybe even the left calf. And then we're going to come on up from that, bring the right foot across the left leg. Again, really pay attention to the soles of your feet. You want your right foot fully connected to the ground. Left foot should be a little bit active. And then we're going to take that right arm around behind us. And we use that to help us keep the spine straight. And we start to rotate to the right. So again, you can just hug on your left knee, or you can bring, sorry, that's your right knee. You can hug on your right knee and then just bring your left arm outside of it. Don't let the arm hyperextend. Do your little bent elbow yoga wave. Twist and look over your right shoulder. Rotate all the way back around. Extend your right leg out. Give both legs a good wiggle. Before we roll into our backs, we're just going to do our wide angled seated forward bend. Still critical to feel your sit bones, base of the pelvis. So if the hips are tight and your pelvis wants to kind of tilt here and like round, you need to make sure that you can push so that your pelvis is straight up and down. Do whatever you got to do to get there. If you can't press into the floor to get there, but your hips are tight, please know it's also okay to elevate your hips a little bit here. Sit on a blanket or a bolster. Then keep your spine nice and extended. So you can either have your hands in front of you, behind you, on your legs, on your feet, but you want your torso to lengthen forward rather than down. And you just kind of pay attention again to active muscles, not tense, but energized. Same thing with the spine. You don't want it tensed or arched, but you want your spine energized. And the cool thing is if you just really keep paying attention to all of those things, before you know it, you'll be fairly far down because gravity's carrying you. And your body, your muscles will stop you at the point that it can become too much. Your body has just an amazing amount of wisdom. I know for me personally, my body's incredibly wise. If I just get out of the way and let it do what it needs to do, I'm always better off. Let's take 2 more breaths here and then you get to lie down. So as you come back up, use your hands on the outside edges of your legs to help them back together. Give your legs a good wiggle. Excellent. And then you can just slowly Find your way onto your back. Hug your knees in. This is often called a cradle rock. So you just kind of splay your elbows out to the side and roll back and forth across your back. It should feel good. And then just still keeping it pretty simple. We're going to keep the right knee hugged into the chest and extend the left leg all the way out onto the floor. So this is called wind relieving pose. It's a fantastic way to stretch out, in this case, your right glute and the right side of the low back. It has benefits to your digestive system as well, of course, intestines, but it's a really nice way to release the low back. Let's hold it for one more breath. A lot of times we just think of it as a transition, but it is its own pose. Go ahead and bring your left knee back up, switch, hang on to the left one, extend your right leg all the way out, keep that left knee pulling in. And then we're going to bring the right knee back up to meet the left knee and rock side to side again. Kind of sticking with basics, our inversion today will be bridge pose. So for the same reason that I have you have your big toes touching and heels separated in Sphinx pose, that's the same reason we do it in bridge. We don't want the glutes really gripping because bridge pose, when done properly, can help lengthen the spine. So we put the feet flat, let the big toes touch and the heels separate. As much as possible, you want your heels pretty close to your backside so that when you lift up, your lower legs are vertical. Now, if you've got knee issues, it may not look like that. You just do the best you can. Also remember that even if you have back issues, you can still lift up and keep this neutral. It doesn't have to be a super bendy pose. What is important is that you keep the entire sole of both feet down. A lot of people like to lift up on their tippy toes. It changes things energetically. You need to be grounded and rooted here. So let's put the hands by the hips. The first thing I want you to do is tilt your pelvis back. You're going to take the curve out of the spine. Keep your pelvis tilted back as you begin to lift your hips. You can adjust foot position if you need to by sliding your heels closer to your backside, but you want to keep your heels sit bone distance apart. The knees are the same distance. Then we push through the heels to lift the hip bones up. Once we get our hips as high as we feel like we can, we lift our rib cage towards our chin. It's like when you're standing, I have you roll it back. It's that same motion. Those of you that like to can interlace your fingers underneath you, but your arms have to be able to go straight because you're going to actually roll onto the back of the arms. Now, if that doesn't work for you, you keep your hands palms down, flat by your hips. But the idea here is to continue to push through the entire sole of each foot, particularly the heels, and lift your hips and lift your rib cage and lengthen your spine. Let's take 2 more deep breaths here. On your next exhale, you can slowly lower down, hug your knees in, and rock side to side. From here, we're going to move into a classic dead bug pose. So again, some of the newer teachers call it happy baby, but in my tradition, happy babies move. Dead bugs don't. So this one's dead bug, and then we'll transition to happy baby. What I'd like you to do is with your knees where they are, separate them. Splay your knees out to the side. Reach your arms in between your knees to find the arches of your feet. Flex your feet, and then see if you can get your lower legs vertical, which means your knees are outside your torso. Your heels are vertically stacked over your knees, and then you're going to apply a little bit of pressure. So you're actually pulling down on the arches of the feet slightly, just to get your hamstrings and maybe a little bit of the glutes to say hello. If this bothers your back at all, you're going to want to really press the backside of your pelvis into the mat. Take one more breath here. Then I want you to just slide your hands around to the outside edges of your feet. Now you get to be a happy baby, which is to wiggle and stretch and move. Think about how babies kind of just randomly move around in their cribs, and they're usually pretty happy when they're doing it. They're not doing anything that doesn't feel good. So you want to be just like that baby and just do the stuff that feels good. But move around, explore. We're going to take a couple more breaths here. And then when you feel like you're ready, just hug your knees back in. So we're going to end up with a spinal twist and then just some low back lengthening stuff. I'm going to talk you through a mid-range one, but you guys know if you need a really gentle spinal twist from where you're at right here with your knees bent in the air, you're just going to drop them over to the right. For those of you who want to go mid-range, keep your left knee hugged in and extend your right leg all the way back out onto the ground. This is winter leading pose again. But now we use the right hand to pull the left leg across the body to the right and let the left arm open out to the left. So if you've done it this way and it feels like too much, bend your right knee and you should be fine. If you've just kind of let your left leg flop in front of the right one and you want to feel even more, hook the toes of your left foot on the back side of your right knee or thigh. So the main point of this is that you make the pose work for your body. You don't try to adapt your body to the pose. You adapt the pose to your body. Never, ever, ever do anything that doesn't feel right for you, because if you're doing that, it's not yoga. Yoga is being mindful and making sure that whatever you do is therapeutic for you. As much as possible, you want to relax into this twist, let go of any muscular tension that's not absolutely necessary to hold you in the pose. And then we'll come back up and just hug both knees into the chest. So again, if you're taking the gentler version, just from feet and knees in the air, drop both bent knees to the left. Otherwise, keep the right knee hugged in, extend your left leg out. And then use your left hand on your right knee to pull the leg across the body with your right arm opening out to the right. If it's too much, both knees are bent. If it's not enough, right toes hook behind the left thigh or knee. So your right arm is opened out to the right. You can change the angle of the hand, make it yours. Let your palm face upward. And if it's okay with your neck, in this case, your head would turn to the right. Remember, you want to relax your muscles here as much as possible. And then go ahead and roll onto your back, hugging both knees into your chest again. Put both feet flat on the mat with your knees bent. Let's just do a couple of those gentle hip rolls. You're going to let both knees drop to one side on an exhale. Inhale them up and exhale, drop them the opposite direction. 2 or 3 times on each side, just enough to kind of release everything. It's like a little signal to your body that everything after this is good. It's all good. When you feel like you're even, just let the knees drop open away from each other. Let the soles of your feet connect to each other so they're touching. Just pause for a moment. And then the next time you breathe in, you're going to press your low back into the mat, flattening it out. Breathing, breathing, breathing. And then as you exhale, release. Extend your legs. Just make sure they're in the best place. So maybe start with them close together. No. Maybe take them really far apart. No. Find your Goldilocks spot. Not too far apart, not too close together, just right. When you find the spot that's right for you, just let your legs drop or flop. They will either naturally rotate out or in. Let that happen. Soften your backside. Lengthen your spine. Relax your shoulders. Find the perfect Goldilocks spot for your arms, palms facing up. Soften your jaw, close your eyes, and then just take a really deep breath in through the nose. And a big exhale through the mouth, and relax. Feel every part of your body just flattening out onto the floor. Feel your breath getting softer. I'd like you to imagine right at the center of your body that you're kind of like a candle. I actually like to sometimes imagine there's a wick in my navel. So we're going to actually just imagine ourselves slowly softening from the center outward. So right around your stomach or midsection, imagine that just like when you start to burn a candle, the wax becomes liquid from the center outward. So slowly over time, you have this ever widening circle of liquid wax. I want you to feel as though that's what's happening to you as you lie here in Shavasana and breathe. You can feel yourself becoming more relaxed, perhaps a little warmer, definitely more fluid. And as you feel this warmth and liquidity reaching your sides, allow it to begin to move up and downstream. Feel your hips melting inward as well as the legs and feet. Feel the arms and the hands doing the same, and the neck and the head. You should feel as though you're really just one big, warm puddle. We forget that we are, in fact, more than half water. We are fluid creatures. It's nice to get back in touch with that. Just notice what it feels like to have that level of surrender, to be that fluid. And then you can begin to slowly deepen your breath. Begin to feel back into what feels like the solid you, moving your fingers and toes, and then breathing in deeply to stretch and extend. Fingers and toes, exhaling with the soft side to relax them. Taking another deep breath in and stretching, stretching, stretching through arms and legs, and then exhaling to relax. Go ahead and bend your knees, either hugging them in or just letting the feet be flat on the floor. Roll to your right. And then press yourself back up into sitting. As you come to your seated posture, just take a moment to make sure that you feel really aligned. And so in the same way that we just went back to the beginning, to basics, to the foundation of our poses, we're going to do the same thing with our breath work. We're just going to work with an Ujjayi breath. Ujjayi is the Sanskrit word for powerful or victorious. That breath gives us a lot of power, and yet it's also calming and relaxing. So it's a beautiful breath to continue to practice and perfect throughout life. This is the one where you're partially closing off your throat. We do it through the nose. Some people say it's like trying to whisper with your mouth closed, like if you're humming, but you're humming at a whisper with your mouth closed. I like to think of it as fogging up a mirror, but I can't open my mouth. It's whatever works for you to partially restrict the throat. We want to try and do it on the inhale and the exhale and make it really slow and full and fluid. So all I want you to do is listen to the sound of your breath. You don't have to do any particular count or anything. Just a nice, slow, deep, complete, beautiful Ujjayi breath. Off you go. As you finish off the breath you're on, just keep your eyes closed if they're closed and just let your breath return to normal. Just sit for a moment. Sit with the effects of your physical practice. Sit with the effects of your relaxation and now this particular pranayama breath work. When we talk about the basics of the practice, it's good to remember that this, right now, what you are doing at this moment, simply sitting in stillness, in silence, is really the ultimate goal. This is what it's all about. This is what it all leads to. Bring your palms together in front of your heart, Anjali Mudra. And let's just take a moment in gratitude for yoga, for this discipline, this art and science that helps us at every level if we allow it to. It works. It's why it's still here, because it works. Take one more really deep breath in through your nose. Nice, happy sigh through the mouth. Palms to the forehead, just reminding us to be present. Palms to the lips, reminding us to speak our truth. And palms to the heart, reminding us to keep it open so that kindness, compassion, and love can flow both ways. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.